I have another Sony. This one's a TC131 SD. This is a top loader stereo cassette deck that dates back to 1973. It features Dolby B, chrome tape support, and a full automatic stop. Oh, and it even has an auto limiter for those lazy and don't know how to set recording levels. This thing needs a bit of work to get it going. Let's fix it. Check out this old beast, an old Sony TC131 Stereo cassette recorder. Almost looks like they printed this on lined paper. I've got the owner's manual for it as well. It's got an automatic limiter recording. Can select either standard or chrome tape. Ferrite and ferrite head. A total mechanism shut off. And a multiplex filter, because back in the early days most FM tuners did not have an MPX filter built in, and the problem that happened is the 19 kilohertz pilot tone that was half of the 38 kilohertz double sideband carrier for FM broadcast, by 19 kilohertz tone could affect the Dolby FM, or could affect the Dolby recordings, because with the 19 kilohertz, mosquitoes are out already first thing in the morning, I can't believe it. 19 kilohertz signal, the recorder would see that as a incoming audio signal and boost it, and it would mess it up. So the earlier decks had an MPX filter. So cassettes were still relatively new as far as hi-fi recording went back when this unit was new. Prior to units like this system, this tape recorder, cassettes were typically only used for voice recording. But it's a thing of beauty. An old top-loading machine doesn't work. We're going to get it going. It's going to definitely need belts, for sure, without any question. It's going to need belts. But there's the manual. Take a look and see the specifications here. Oh, look at this. I've got a schematic for it too. When's the last time you saw an owner's manual come with a schematic? Isn't that cool? Like, never. You don't see that today. But all the old stuff, you know, 1970s and into the, mostly into the 70s, I think they stopped doing this. Late 60s, early 70s, they all had a schematic with them, showing all the components, how everything's wired. You stop seeing that in the early 80s. Here's the specifications of this unit. So the recording bias frequency. So here we go. 32 transistors, 20 diodes, it's a 4-track stereo system. Bias frequency 85 kilohertz. 54 dB signal to noise ratio with the Dolby off on a chrome tape. 52 with it on a regular tape. With the Dolby on, it improves your signal to noise ratio 5 dB at 1 kilohertz and then 10 dB above 5 kilohertz. Total harmonic distortion 2.5%. And here's the frequency response: 40 to 13 kilohertz using the NAB frequency response curve, or 10 kilohertz using the standard DIN measurements, with a chrome tape up to 15 kilohertz, which is and 12 using DIN, which is nothing compared to what later cassette decks, because I remember seeing specs of cassette decks going up as high as 20 kilohertz with improved tape and better heads and, you know, just better signal processing. But it was mostly the head. This uses a ferrite head, and once they developed the permalloy heads and sendust heads, we saw the frequency response go way up. But I think this is just kind of cool, you know. Oh, what is a chromium dioxide tape? Okay, so I love it. Just they talk about, this is stuff you just don't see. That's why I'm showing you guys this. This is stuff that you don't see in modern equipment. They don't tell you how they did it. This is wonderful, you know. Explanation, Dolby noise reduction, right? And it's just the amount of information that Sony put into putting out this manual, right? Show you how to connect it, how to record, how you want to record what your record levels you want to set it to, how to make a recording. Right. Some of the stuff that I find interesting though is total mechanism shut off. So it'll completely shut off the unit regardless what mode it's in. But some of the things is how to play back the opposite side of the cassette. Yeah, you turn it over. You think, you know, it's like, and then they'll talk about Dolby in the cassette format. And how to clean the heads. Lubrication is not required for long periods of time. How to erase a tape. Turn the recorder levels down. Yeah, no kidding. Here's a little description of how the Dolby system works. I got to thinking the frequency response limited to 15 kilohertz is probably because of the MPX filter. It rolls off above that. And the effects. So you have a limiter here so that you can set the limiter on so that you don't exceed 0 dB, because of course the earlier tapes didn't have much headroom. And then they talk about the head. It's a ferrite and ferrite head. Chromium dioxide tape. This is something you don't see anymore. I haven't actually seen a real chromium dioxide tape in many years. It was put out by BASF. The only type of chromium dioxide tapes that I actually have are some of the Sony ferrochrome, which was chromium dioxide over top of ferric oxide. That gave the best of both worlds because it had the bass response of a ferric oxide tape with nice punchy bass, but the crisp highs of a chrome tape, so it was kind of the best of both worlds. And very few companies made them, but chromium dioxide tape was pure chrome, and it recorded much higher frequencies than regular tape. And it says right here, yet chromium dioxide's higher efficiency and higher frequencies provides a higher signal noise ratio because it requires less record energy in the high frequency range. And you know, it did a good job, you know, in the day. The big drawbacks with chromium dioxide was it was much more abrasive on the heads. So if you didn't have a head that was a good head material, they would tend to wear down, you know, fairly quickly. Anyway, that's the manual. Enough about that. Let's get on to this work of art. We'll get this thing apart and change out the belts and see what other work it might need. I'm assuming that this thing needs belts. I haven't opened it up yet. Oh, it has a belt, but it's missing one over here. That belt's pretty bad. So this belt looks to be in pretty rough shape. Looks like it's missing two belts. There's a belt that goes from the motor over to this idler pulley, and then there's another belt that goes from the bottom of the idler pulley over to here. I don't know what that turns. Oh, you know what? I bet you that's the auto stop. That's the automatic shut-off mechanism. That's what this is. This just turns a little gear, and it turns the auto stop lever. You can see it in the background here. See the little auto stop lever here? It'll rise up and down. That's what that is. That's the auto stop mechanism. So I've got one main belt here, but this one here is really worn. I mean, there's no tension at all. So let's find a new belt. And I've got this package of belts that I just got. So let's slip this old belt off and find a new replacement. We'll replace all the belts on this unit. Now I have to take this flywheel assembly has to come apart. I got to remove a couple screws here to lift this bracket out of the way so that I can get the belt through here, because there's a bearing here. I wonder what the best course of attack will be for this. I should probably take the top off the unit too and take it out of the cabinet. Take these out. And another screw here. I don't know if there's any more. There might be one or two more. There's probably another one up front here they gotta find. Should be that screw, I think. So there's the two standoffs here. A screw there and a screw over here. I think that's probably all that has to come out, and then the deck itself will drop out, which it will. There we go. Ugly. Dirty. Very, very dirty. Okay, there's a couple more belts up here. These ones here don't appear to be in as bad a shape. Probably work for the tape counter. This one here is, I believe, the auto stop sensor over here, and it looks to be slipping. So this belt over here, the rubber down here, I don't know what shape that's in. Here's the heads, the erase head and the record play head, and they look to be in okay shape. I don't see any wear. Hey, it's a ferrite head, so it should never wear, right? This is similar to what Akai called their glass and ferrite heads. Akai put their ferrite heads in glass. I don't know what Sony did. They call theirs a ferrite and ferrite, so I guess it's not mounted in glass, but it's still a ferrite head. So it's going to have very good wear properties. Pinch roller doesn't look to be in bad shape either, especially considering the age of this thing. It's not gummy, it feels to be in good shape. So that's a good sign. So we'll remove these two belts. I think these two here will be fine. That will turn this mechanism no problem. And we'll do the same for the counter belt, which has to be fished up from behind here. Gonna get it underneath the counter pulley. Almost have it. Get on one side and it slips off on the other. There we go. Now it turns the tape counter as it should. Let's do the belts on the bottom. Oh yes, to get that flywheel apart, to take the other belt off. Now that I've got the machine out of the chassis, loosen off this bracket. There's two screws that hold the bracket together. I can remove the bracket and replace the capstan belt. And this has never been apart because this is still tight. It's got a lock washer on here too. Got a lock washer and a flat washer. Now I can lift the bracket out, just like that. Look at that, lubricant's still good after all these years. We'll find a new replacement for this old worn piece of junk. This belt might be okay. We'll just see how well it fits. Put it around the motor first. Then around the take-up. And make sure I don't get any grease on here. That belt might be okay. It's kind of stiff. I'll try a different one. That might be a little too tight. So if you go too tight, then it's going to bind. See, no problem with the flywheel. And look at the size of the flywheel on this thing. It's got a fair bit of weight behind it. So it's going to have good inertia, which gives you low wound flutter. But that belt was just a little bit too small. So I'll see if I can find one that's a little bit bigger than that. And we'll go from there. That one might be a little bit bigger. Yeah, that one, I think it's just a little bit bigger. So we'll try this one. See if this one works any better. I think this one might be okay. Let's put power to this thing and see whether it spins. I would say that looks perfect. That's fast forward, by the way. There's play, nice and quiet. I think that belt will be okay. So we'll put the bearing back together. It just clips on like that and drops back in place. And then I got to put the 2 screws back in to hold it together. And then we'll replace the other belts that are missing and give this thing a clean up and see if it still performs. I bet it does. I bet it works fine. Somebody tells me I didn't even have to take this all the way off. I could have just loosened these screws and slipped that over. But hey, this made it easy. There's one screw in place. Okay, now I just got to find 2 more belts to put around here, and from here to, where do they go? One from here to here and one from there to there. A couple small belts here. Let's just try this one out and see how this one works from there around to here. Yeah, that seems to be okay for that one. And this little belt here from there to there. That's probably okay too. Let's check out the auto stop mechanism and see how it performs. So I'll put this thing into one of the modes, put it into play, and I'll stop the hub from turning and see whether it stops. Or whether we're at a lost cause. Maybe the auto stop mechanism's not going to work on this thing. It should stop. But it's not, because something in this mechanism is sticking. So let's see if we can figure out what is sticking. I'm just going to put the rest of these belts aside. So in order for the auto stop to function, how these things operate is when the take-up spool is turning, it's keeping this little lever here moving. Normally what happens is this arm moves back and forth, and it pulls this cam or this lever forward like this. And normally what happens when this mechanism is moving, you can see this little piece down here. Well, normally as this thing continues to move, the friction allows this thing to go like that. Now if the reel stops turning, it drops and sits on that little pin. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but there's a little pin right in here. You'll get a bit better angle. So you normally when it's moving, you can see this lever moves back and forth. But if the pulley stops turning, that pin stays, and then on the next return of this other cam, it pulls it further, which disengages the mechanism. So what's supposed to happen, and I've got this in rewind, that's why it's making all that noise. What's supposed to happen is there's a little catch on the bottom of this arm here, and the catch is there. On the bottom of this arm there's a little catch, and it's supposed to move this like this, back and forth. And as long as this reel is turning, it's got tension on here so that this goes back and forth like this, so it can drop all the way back. Right? Goes back and forth like that. But if it stops turning, then it only goes halfway. And then when this other lever comes back, makes another return, it catches this a second time and pulls it. So there's a double ratchet, but it's not moving this lever. I don't believe it. I may have fixed this thing. Check this out. Okay, if the reel is turning, now this lever is moving like it's supposed to. And if the reel stops turning, it drops into the catch. There we go. Ah, I fixed it. Damn, it must have been just stuck. It looked like the piece was broken, but I think it was just stuck. This little lever here, it's supposed to normally have. Oops, turn the power switch off there. Start this up again. See if it'll do it again. Yeah, there it goes. Ha ha ha. Let's reset this thing so that it's in normal mode. Like that. There, if this take-up spool is turning, as you can see, now it's working. This wasn't dropping down, but now it is. Now it's riding down. Now watch, you'll see the little clip. There, it drops down into place and stops the mechanism. Cool. That is amazing. I didn't think I was going to be able to fix that thing. It must have just got stuck. See, it was stuck up like that, but now it's dropping into place. Excellent. So it must have been just something sticking, maybe in this hinge right here. If you guys can see it. This was not dropping into place. This lever here, it might have been just this hinge was kind of sticking, because you'll see it operating. I'll turn it on again. I'll put it in play so you can see how the thing normally operates. So the lever goes back and forth like that, and it pulls this other lever back and forth. You can see this part here moving. Right now, if I stop the unit, if I stop the spool from turning, you'll see what the mechanism does. Right? Normally it runs like that. Right? You see it rocking back and forth here. And that normally has a spring pulling down on it, and it's now locking into place. And if I stop the spool from turning, and now watch what happens. Goes back an extra catch and releases the mechanism. That is how the auto stop on these units works. And what sometimes happens is, in addition to pieces that can break in here, is this spring here is what pulls tension on this arm to pull it down, so that there's a little catch on the bottom of here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a little catch that hooks this other piece and pulls this piece back and forth, this other little plastic piece. This is the one that's riding in the groove from the we know it when we're watching it operating in normal mode here. This is the catch that's moving back and forth. See if I can get a better shot of this. But you can see the mechanism here riding. You can see there's the cam there. You can see it. I'll point it out. The cam here. This little pin. This is actually on this little roller that's being turned by the take-up spool, and it keeps it going back and forth, as you can see, like that. Keeps it going back and forth. But as soon as the take-up spool stops, when it centers it, it'll land on this middle piece. So watch what happens when I stop the spool from turning. If I just stop the pulley here, okay, I'm just not going to stop it yet. Okay, now the tape ends. Now you see what happens? Now it sits in the middle, and then the next time it catches it, it pulls it a second time, which disengages. So there's a double ratchet on this piece. And what was happening on this one is, probably because it hadn't been used in so many years, is I think probably the lubricant got dried up in this little pivot that's right here. I think that's probably what, where is it here? That was a little pivot right there. And I think probably what happened is some of the lubricant in here got dried up, so that this arm was stuck up like this and it wasn't dropping back down. Because see, that's pulled down by this spring, and now it's working. So that's good. Put it back into play and we'll show you it working again. See, it rides up and down, and it pulls this secondary, it pulls this clip. Now this one's going to ride back and forth as long as this little pulley is turning. It's causing that other little lever to move back and forth in its groove. But if I stop it, right now it's going to only go halfway. Right now, that was the second ratchet. So that is working. I'm happy. Let's put a tape into this machine and do some recording and see how this thing sounds. I can't wait. I can't wait to see how good this thing actually sounds after sitting all these years. First thing I want to do is actually check out the speed. So I'll load my tone tape in here, and I think this is a stop, so this got to be play. We'll see how far this is off. Oh, nice wound flutter. Woo, 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 woo. Terrible. And it's slow. About 434 hertz instead of 440. So it's slow, but hey, it's old, right? The speed is a little slow. There's no motor speed adjustment on here. The speed is internal inside the motor. So I don't see any adjustments on this motor. It's kind of sealed up, and if I open up this tab, the motor will probably fall apart. I bet you there's a little circuit board in here that might have a speed adjustment in here, but I don't know if I want to risk destroying the motor to get in there. I don't know if I can get in and get this thing back together. Might be able to open this thing up if I bend these tabs a bit. Of course, that might spell the end of this machine, but let's just see whether this motor can be opened up or not. See if I can get at the adjustments for it, if there are any inside here. Okay, bend the tabs up. Is there a motor speed adjustment, or is this mechanical? This is mechanical, this motor. So there's no speed adjustments on this one. So it looks like it's going to be running a tad slow. There's nothing I can do about that other than replace the motor, and well, that's not going to happen. Not on a machine this old. Now I got to bend those tabs. You notice I didn't show you guys my method of bending those tabs back because it will just incite a bunch of thumbs downs from people that don't like seeing brute force applied to old electronics. But sometimes you have to do that, right? Okay, let's just see how well this thing actually records. Despite the fact that it's a little bit slow, can't do anything about that because, as you can see, there's no adjustment. This is all purely mechanical. So this motor here would be one of the ones that has the little weights, the mechanical governor weights that spin out and actually slow the thing down. Anyway, let's see how well this thing records. So rewind the tape. And the auto stop should kick in here. If it's going to work still, which it does. Let's put it into record pause. Just the button for that one. Pause. Oh yeah, it's way over here. Okay, pause lever down. Put this thing into record and play at the same time. Record and play, and looks like I don't even have to clean my controls. They look to be okay. Just looking to see what's on here. Normal tape, limiter's off, and Dolby is on. Why not, eh? Okay. We'll set our levels accordingly. We'll pick a song. That one works. Okay. Release the pause. Reset the counter. And play. I'm a little bit hot, but that's okay. We can turn on the limiter, and the limiter will take care of that for me. How cool is that? If you like that nice auto level control, that nice compressed sound, what better way to do it than an automatic limiter on one of these old Sony tape decks? You know, what's funny is I know somebody who used to use a deck very much like this. He used to use it and didn't record anything on it, just had it sitting in record and had the pause button on it, and he looped his sound system through this and back out and put the limiter on. And the reason he did it was being used for background music, and they didn't want loud and quiet passages. They wanted everything to be the same that was fed to a background music system, so they actually used an old tape deck like this just as a background limiter. This is back in the days before you could get, you know, standalone limiters that was being used. This is going back years, and it was basically being used for, I think it was for music on hold to go into the phone system, because they didn't want they were just playing the radio, right, and they didn't want loud things blasting somebody in the ear, so they put it through a tape deck like this, turned on the limiter, and just let the thing sit in record and play. It was being fed through their store as well, right, but they had it on the music on hold, and they didn't want that. They didn't want, you know, loud and quiet passages. They wanted everything to be roughly the same. So what this will do is, if the levels are really low, they will actually bring the levels up. You'll hear it come up in the background. Or if I crank it up, it'll drop it back. If I turn the limiter off, of course, right? So you had all this dynamic range with the limiter on. It only went so loud, and then it was cut back. So what they used to do in this shop was they just left the level controls all the way up to the top, as high as it would go, and then they just had the limiter turned on, because that way, if the music that was playing had a really quiet passage, it would bring the quiet passage up so that it could be heard, and if there was a really loud passage, it would bring it down. And the shop used to actually play classical music, which of course classical music is well known for, you know, if you're dealing with an orchestra, having a really quiet passage or having a really loud passage. So that's what they did, and they just was a poor man's automatic level. Gets the job done. Let's check out the playback. So we'll stop the tape, rewind it. It's not rewinding too bad, considering that the rollers haven't even been touched up. They are still very old and probably pretty shiny. I'll put some rubber renew on them and see if we can get a little more grip out of them. But here's playback on this ancient cassette deck. That's where it would have turned on the automatic level control right there. I think we can, I'll try some rubber renew and see whether that'll give me a little more grip. How's fast forward look on this? Fast forward's got a fair bit of torque. Looks to be this roller down here that needs it. Not the ones, not these ones, but looks to be this roller down here that needs it. Looks to be the bottom part of this roller, which makes contact with the main flywheel. So we'll get in here with some of this stinky stuff. Okay, there it is, rewinding a tape now after it's dried for a bit. We'll rewind and fast forward the tapes a few times here and see how it's working. You can see the auto stop, how the auto stop lever just goes back and forth there. Okay, after fast forwarding and rewinding this a few times, you can see that the rubber has really softened up a bit, and now it's got plenty of torque. So this old unit is once again ready to go back together. As you can see, there's the tape. Gets to the end on fast forward. Auto stop will stop the machine. We'll rewind it back to the beginning, and then we'll put this thing together. Well, there it is back at the beginning. So the cover just sits over top of the unit like that. Turn it over and put the retaining screws back in. So the two mounting posts go in, and these are torqued down a bit, and then there's two screws that hold the unit together. One that goes down right here, and the other one goes right there. Of course, there's one more post that goes down here, but unfortunately when I took the back off it, it stayed with the bottom cover, so I have to actually remove it from here. Last but not least, the back cover, or bottom cover I should say. And of course, the record level knobs. Give it a final test. Oh, I guess you know what? I should demagnetize the heads on this thing, so let's do that now. Shut the power off to the unit so that there's no influence, and I'll put the unit into probably record. It's probably the safest place to be. That way the playback amplifier is not connected to the head, because sometimes if you induce a high magnetic field into the head, you could damage the preamp, especially if it's an FET type preamp. So by putting it into record, the record head is now going to be connected to the record circuitry, which won't have it connected to the playback circuitry, if you figure that one out. We'll turn on the power, and I'll just take my little magnet eraser, my AC magnet, and just bring it near the heads and near the capstan shaft, and just around the head, around the erase head, and then slowly remove it, turn off the power. Now I can take this thing out of record, and we can test it. Like any good cassette enthusiast, we always wind the tape up to the start, right, before we actually put the machine in record. That way we're ready to go. Record pause. Got my music queued up. We'll pretend this is my vinyl record, and I release the pause and I cue the record. Take us back to the 1970s when we made our mixed tapes using an old turntable and an old tape deck like this. Recorded these tapes to listen to in our car. Let this thing record, and then we'll check the quality out on playback. Okay, recording done. Rewind it. See, everything's working like it's supposed to, like a new machine. And of course, the auto stop, the all-important auto stop. Let's check out the playback quality from this ancient old Sony. Should sound actually pretty good. So there you go, that's the restoration of a TC131 Sony top-load stereo cassette deck from one of the earliest of the home component cassette decks that was actually designed for hi-fi use. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll catch you again real soon. Thanks for watching.